Hello and welcome, everyone. This is Evo from Playable Agency. It's great to see you. And I am here today with one of the most amazing theater creators I have encountered in this extended reality space. You may have seen him from lots of other projects across the web, whether it's on YouTube or now in VR in different worlds. So welcome, Brendan A. Bradley, to Virtual Experiences. Great to see you, Brendan. Hi.
Having me. Hello, hello.
And you're joining us today from LA, I take it?
I am.
Excellent, excellent. So
I think I am. I haven't left in a very long time. I could be anywhere, really.
That's the thing, is we've all kind of gone into these other portals where it's all like we're in a David Lynch movie and we don't know how to get out. It's great to see you here. And we are going to be able to take some questions across different social media networks. So if you have a question for Brendan today, we're going to look at a couple of interesting virtual stages, maybe some places where you can do your own virtual theater experiences. And I want Brendan to be able to talk us through some of what he's created. I've seen only a fraction, so I want to be super clear that we're just going to get the sort of early stage explosion of the work of this gentleman. Okay, so
can I just shout out before we get going?
Yeah.
Tell me where all the places we're streaming and broadcasting right now today, and I can give that a shout out for the people that might want to join the conversation.
Absolutely, right. So I am coming to you live on Periscope. So that's everything left on Twitter. Let's see what happens there. We are on Playable Agency on Twitch. We are at Playable Agency on YouTube as well, and on Facebook.
Awesome. YouTube.com/Playable Agency.
Yeah, you will find, and you know what, now's a great time to subscribe because we're almost at 100 subscribers there. So we'll have that turned on for the name change this week. So thanks for sticking with us throughout this COVID live cast. We've been doing this show now, Brendan, for a week, since last summer. So as I started meeting more creators like you who are working across different worlds, I got excited by some of the new experiences being created. And honestly, it was one of your pieces. It was particularly this piece, the free theater template that I remember first in getting a chance to explore your work. This is in Hubs, correct? Can you tell me a little bit about what you did here with Future Stages?
Absolutely. So I have a 10-year background in theater, producing and acting, and then I have a 10-year background in digital media. And obviously in March, all these things collided. And suddenly I found myself at the intersection and had a lot of community members from both sides asking me, how do we get involved? What do we do? And one of those things was I have a lab at NYU called the Integrative Technology Lab that introduces new technologies. And they started doing VR theater during the spring semester when they couldn't meet in person. And theater companies were approaching me and asking, how do we do VR? How do we get involved? And very quickly, we were finding solutions, but they didn't want to do them because they're like, well, we're going to use this thing called Zoom because it's free. And I'd actually been using Zoom for 3 years because it's in a feature film of mine called Non-Transferable. They use video chatting, and we got Zoom to sponsor and partner with us for the movie. And so I was like, Zoom is great, but it's limited as a 2D platform. It's a video chat. It's a robust video collaborative work platform. I don't know that it's as artistic a platform. It doesn't have a toolkit out of the bag. And so I started basically a fact-finding mission of what other free open source technologies are out there for artists to use. And one of them was Mozilla Hubs, which is a browser-based virtual reality platform, which means anybody from any device that has a web browser, pretty much, you can log into a Mozilla Hubs room, which is a virtual reality room. And so I built a theater in Mozilla Hubs as what is called a templated space, which I believe I learned that term from you on a phone call. You were like, how long have you made templated spaces? And I was like, the what now? And you're like, yeah, it's a templated space. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. I didn't know it had a name. So I designed this theater and then I released it Creative Commons to basically say, please come. You don't have to know how to model. You don't have to know how to code. Spawn my theater, make shows inside of it. And I've worked with about, I want to say 50 different artists and companies over the last year to actually stage works, sometimes in fully immersive VR in using the future stages. Otherwise, they've said, that isn't exactly what this narrative needs or this show needs. And we have found other solutions, which is just continued to educate myself and empower artists everywhere to be able to just meet this moment and make technology and make art.
So I was absolutely fascinated by how beautifully you basically created a black box theater where any theater group can go, and whether you're high schoolers, college students, doesn't matter. You can create your own theatrical works and customize your avatars, customize the playbill and the posters, and really make the theater your own. And it's not that hard. I was surprised because a lot of these hubs builds are very bespoke to a very specific experience. And what you did was the direct opposite. You put a black box theater that you can make anything at all. And that was so interesting because it's open sourcing virtual theater in a way that I don't think I had seen before or since. Can you tell me maybe who's been using the theater and what types of experiences have been coming through that type of space?
Sure. I mean, what's exciting about giving away a template is you don't know everybody that's using it. But occasionally I get invited to shows and I'm excited to go see what people are doing with it. The idea of what I built is it is a black box theater or a proscenium theater. There's two options that you literally click on a button, you open up a room using the template. And then if you want to get fancy, I've basically treated 5 or 6 different hyperlink regions within the build. So basically, if you want to switch out the show posters and switch out the live stream video that's playing inside the theater, you simply change those links to yours and you're ready to go. You can host the event. You can also get under the hood and customize it a lot more, and people have. And so it's everything from Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop began hosting their monthly workshop series inside Future Stages. Actors Theater of Louisville asked me to help onboard their professional training company for their showcase inside the theater. And then from that, using kind of the technology and kind of kit bashing it, they kind of broke my theater apart and then put it back together with an actual model somebody had made of their theater on Sketchfab. Like they found that like some random person had made a 3D version of their theater. And so they used elements of mine with elements of that and created kind of a kit bashed theater to put together.
So this is what we're seeing here is you're doing a tutorial video of how to do a theater piece and how to use the theater. And it looks like you're using green screen so that you're able to sort of disappear into the virtual stage. Is that correct?
So you can do it 3 different ways. We have tried 3 different modes of storytelling in the space. First, you could just straight up take a live stream link. Like we could take this link of this live stream of us talking, literally replace the link that is the basically the scrim, the back wall of the theater. And it's like a movie theater. It's just a video playing inside of a theater. Boom, it's playing. Suddenly now the audience can go attend this live stream. So if you are just doing Zoom theater already or doing Twitch theater, fantastic. I don't want to get in the way of your workflow. Just stick it in a theater and allow the audience to go hang out with each other. If you want to get more advanced than that, you can actually import in live web video or just video assets as if they are 3D models. So you can actually just have people spawn videos or web cameras into the theater, and then to your point, kind of composite them together. So I've taken like everything from a panel where like we put 5 people's webcams behind a table and looked like they were all on stage at the same table together talking for a little panel. I've had actors that we've composited together inside of a boat, floating in the middle, theater in the round with the audience sitting around them, and they were in the boat, and we put the 3 images of the actors where they would be sitting in the boat, and then the actors were turning and referencing to each other as if they were in the boat together. And then we've performed as the avatars. When you put on a headset in hubs, basically I always have to remember to explain this because this is weird to explain. When you enter Mozilla Hubs, you are an avatar. You do not see your avatar, much like you have to look down to see your own physical body. Same.
Right.
You would have to look way down and you can kind of see some edging of your physical body or your virtual body inside of hubs, but you are represented as an avatar. So when you're walking around, you're seeing all these other avatars, which are other people in the space that you can walk up to and start a conversation. Similarly, when you put on a headset, this avatar suddenly gets hands. And you can then use these hands to gesture, to grab things, to move things. And so our actors wore headsets and sat in the middle of the stage with the audience around them sitting in seats, and they performed. And they just sat there and they performed a play for a live audience, picking up props, moving, like passing props to each other, fighting, swimming, like working around. So that is the second image, the live theater and virtual reality. We took a one act of mine called Jettison that has been produced several times and is published, but it is kind of an unproducible play because it's about three strangers in a lifeboat who are stranded out in the middle of the ocean. And different productions have struggled with how to put a boat on a regular kind of traditional stage and put actors in it. But here we can see you've got the video going of us compositing the actors together into the same web video and then trying to line them up inside the boat.
Oh, this is hard to get them to look at each other.
Yep. We had to like work out where the eye lines were, which was really fun. And then we ultimately put people physically. If you go back to that original page that this is playing on, so this video is playing on a page, and if you scroll down on the page, so here you have this first GIF that's looping is a small little section of the actors passing a prop between each other as avatars in the boat, and then you have compositing of the 3D video of the actors in the boat. So those are the two modes that we did for this particular play, using virtual reality and using webcams and using headsets. And all this was just open source. Like basically, aside from making sure the actors had headsets, all this was free. We showed up and we rehearsed.
And I see here that you're using OBS Ninja because it's a maximum of 4 actors in OBS Ninja. Is that right?
I believe, yes. OBS Ninja has a maximum of 4, but the key with OBS Ninja was we needed a tool. We were really worried about sync and about kind of compositing those web cameras together. So if you're in Mozilla, you can just spawn your web camera and you'll have like 4 little squares that you're trying to like match up next to each other, which gets awkward and weird. But what we did was we just sent our OBS Ninja feeds to our stage manager, which is Alex pointing at stuff right now. And then he composited us. So here's the workflow is the actors, they log on to their laptop with their Bluetooth headphones, and then they get on their headset. Then they've got their phone camera that's beaming OBS Ninja to the stage manager. Stage manager's compositing them and using the stage manager's web camera to go into the show. So that was our kind of workaround to be able to bring these actors physically, their live video feeds onto the same stage.
This is amazing that you were able to pull this off for, it sounds like, was this a 1-act or a 3-act play?
This was a 1-act play that I had previously written. What we're hoping to do, kind of Blue Skies version, as we look into this new year, we did this last October. We would love to do like an evening of 1-acts and really invite a bunch of theater makers from all over the world who are working with these virtual modes of storytelling to try out. Basically, if you could go to an evening of different ways of trying this stuff. So it's like, this is how we did it, but like, please do it your way and have a weird dance piece or use volumetric video or, use 360 video or kit bash the room in a weird way. Like we really want to kind of bring the audience. We're calling it kind of a dark ride of like taking the audience through the journey of an evening of 1-acts to show a variety of ways that you might use this open source technology to tell stories.
This is astonishing. I love it. I'm sad I missed the performance of this. When did you? So this was November that you put together the first performances of Jettison?
The first performances ran through October, and we were part of the Here Festival, which was no Proscenium's kind of quick. We can't meet in person, so we'll do it virtually. And they did the Here Festival. And so we were kind of the evening entertainment for you to be able to come and see a show and then talk about it afterwards. Like it was so cool to be able to then after the show each night, sit around and talk about what worked, what didn't, what do you find unique? I think the biggest thing that we found was that and this is accidental, this is an unfair advantage. We did not plan this, but so much of virtual and video game culture, you enter these spaces with either no sense of the rules or actually somewhat of an antagonistic, aggressive sense of the rules. Like the idea is to kind of like be combated. And we see this in like, a lot of the virtual spaces like VR chat and Facebook's spaces, venues, is that there's this kind of like teenagers running around trying to provoke people and chasing people and kind of like aggressing, which we don't want, or I don't want anyway. I want to create collaborative, open spaces that people feel safe and supported. And so what we found, what was interesting was by housing it in a theater, even though you could argue all day that like, well, it's VR, couldn't you put them really on an ocean? Couldn't you like put them in a rainforest? Yes. But by starting in a theater, people brought the ritual of attending a theater to our theater. So when they bumped into other avatars, they said, excuse me, because they had the sense that they were at the theater at a space rather than in a video game where the idea is to like run over somebody or blow somebody up. And so I think that in some ways it's helping the audience understand their role in these environments and giving them that sense of ritual that we miss, which is walking into the theater, going to the box office, grabbing the program, finding your seat, sitting down. Like we don't need to skip those stages. We need to simulate them.
I love how you encapsulate so much experimentation in something that's very easy to understand. And it's like, go to this link and you will go to this type of experience. You've made something that's very difficult for most people to understand, and you've placed it in the analog world, right? Everything you've sort of faithfully recreated feels real enough that you're giving people these touchstones, so that every experience you're having, it doesn't feel like an avatar experience. It feels like something more complete, like going to a real theater. And I'm fascinated because you're exploring Mozilla Hubs, which is a VR or web-based open world where people can create their own experiences and sort of, do this open source modding of the theatrical experience. But then you're also doing these things that are much more curated theater, right? You come from a New York theater background, is that correct?
I come from originally a community theater background in the middle of North Carolina, where there was really no community for it. And it was about like, who are the people who are going to come together and keep a narrative tradition alive? And that's honestly, my first play was done in the round in a non-traditional theater venue. And the first time I was on a proscenium stage, it felt weird. I was like, what do you mean I can't look back there? What do you mean I have to only look this way or be at this place? And then I moved to New York and I started producing and being in theater in New York City, which I absolutely loved. But then I got really into early YouTube culture around 2006, 2007. And I was obsessed, and I don't know why. It does not make sense to me today why this made any sense. I don't know why I moved across the country for this. But to me, I saw early YouTube culture as black box theater with a camera. And I very quickly started seeing that on an average night, I could get more clicks on the video than I could get butts in the seats. And so it allowed that same devising new work, experimenting, supporting new voices, avant-garde, fringe, exploration, experimentation, but then with a little bit more of a return on investment to at least be able to reach an audience.
That makes a lot of sense, that you basically went to interactive media to scale yourself, to move beyond the 70 or maybe a couple hundred folk in a seats, right? I'm with you. Creating immersive theater and experimental theater and improv theater on the East Coast, I loved it, but the intimacy I loved. But the sense that you're always performing for 50 folks can get a little bit frustrating at times. And so you've figured out some very interesting ways to sort of scale yourself and make yourself available as this sort of interactive host, and somebody who can kind of go across metaverses, which is fascinating. I'm noticing this piece here, which this is a museum collaboration that we're looking at now, correct?
Correct. So I was approached by the Museum of Science in Boston, which is a lovely institution that has really done a lot for virtual work. They really pivoted aggressively to be like, how can we preserve our programming online since the physical venue is shuttered? And what they did a really great job of doing was, A, spinning up these kind of in-person events, kind of TED Talky type things from home. But then they approached me and said, hey, can you show off some of your virtual theater work and some of these tools in kind of a talk for us? And I said, at this point, I was doing like a couple talks a week for universities and high schools and companies. And I was really missing the performance part. And I said, do you mind if I did like a one-man show instead? And they were like, what would that look like? And I was like, I don't know, let's find out. And so in this piece, it's an hour-long piece, and it's me from my living room. If you go to the very, very end of this, or it's not the end of the video because there's a talk back, but if you kind of scrub through to about an hour into my talk, you'll see at the very end of the show, I actually tear down my green tablecloth curtain to be able to reveal that I've just been in my living room the whole time. And what I did was I put myself on their stage, and then I used the technology to put myself on different stages. And I was cueing the entire show from my cell phone. So there's over 70 cues in the show that I was just flipping through, timing, choreographing, and blocking. And I was basically producing the whole show as a one-man show from home.
Wait, you did 70 cues from your phone? I'm blown. Tell me about your workflow. I please. How did you do that?
So if you're, so you'll see, this is me just with a crappy green tablecloth and some formats. If you now back up to like midway through the video, I actually midway through the show talk about how am I doing this? And I show you my OBS, maybe go a little bit further to the left. Nope, go to the right. You were correct. You were correct. Where we were. You'll see OBS on the screen. Keep going. And there it is. So I start showing the OBS on the screen. You can see all the cues on the left-hand side. And what I basically did was I used the Stream Deck app, and I created 8 cues. One of them was just the cue next. And I would just hit next at places that I'd rehearsed in the show to be able to trigger the next cue. And then by referencing it in the show, it meant that I built in breaks that I could on the keyboard go to OBS and actually find the right next cue. So that way, if I ever got derailed during the show or during rehearsals, I could just kind of stick in the bad cue for a little bit, go to the next part where I would go to the actual computer, change the cue manually, and then I'd be back on track for next.
So when did this experience happen? Because this is during COVID. This is within the last few months.
Yes. So that was during October as well.
Wow.
I built the show from July through September, and we were doing techs over Zoom to be able to make sure. Because what I do is I actually bring museum staff members up on stage with me to perform Midsummer Night's Dream. And so I like showed OBS Ninja live on stage, and to do the tech on that was nonsense. And then I'm using like Snapchat filters that did not like cooperating with Zoom. So there were like 4 cues in the show that didn't work during tech. And we were like, should we cut them? And I was like, I mean, they work when y'all aren't here on Zoom. Can we just trust that the show will work? And I'll roll with it if it doesn't. And then and
if a cue drops out of 70, then exactly. No one's really gonna.
And it's theater. Sometimes the spotlight's in the wrong place. That happens all the time. But yeah, so this is this hour-long show. And if you are just dipping your toes into this, I think that I always point people to this first, because it's me basically doing Shakespeare monologues, talking about my journey, and literally telling you, here's this piece of technology, here's how it works. Now I'm going to do a Shakespeare monologue using it. Here's this piece of technology, here's how it works. Now I'm going to do the Shakespeare monologue using it. And I go through that 5 times, basically.
You absolutely anticipated my next question, which is for everyone writing a theater department, let's say the high school, the college theater departments. I've had, probably 20 calls from different universities, for example, trying to figure out how to do what you've described. Lessons you've learned that you would want to pass along to those who are trying to do something like this with their group?
100%. I think that there's a thing, the thing I've learned most from XR and virtual culture is that it's a community of openness, and it's sharing early, sharing often. So I'll get random people I've never met to send me plugins from like the Twitch community or from the XR community who are like, hey, you don't know that you're doing this wrong, but here, we figured it out. And I'll be like, oh, that's awesome. And I think that in some ways in our academic institutions, we're used to this idea of this hierarchy of knowledge of like the teacher knows it first and then passes it down. And I think in some ways, letting the students in on the discovery and on the uncertainty of it, of us all owning the fact that none of us know the answer right now. There are no perfect solutions, so there's no wrong answers, and letting the students be part of the discovery and the devising of this new work lets them feel included in making the show. So it's no longer the role of, I think that so often in educational theater, we preserve this idea of like the director who like creates the show and has the vision. And like, that is very important. And I think that that's fantastic in professional commercialized theater. But if the point is education, then I think instead the teacher or the director's role is more of a facilitator of how to explore and experiment with these new tools and workflows. And so I would say that letting your students come in on the ground floor with you and going like, what show are we going to do? And how are we going to approach this? And I've broken this down into what I call 6 key considerations, which I call devise, DEVISE. And so there is, let's see if I might actually have them somewhere in here. Get real nuts with our cues real fast. Nope. I might have gotten here they are. Great. Devise. So we'll start with design, right, which is thinking about how do we represent physical stagecraft and what we have normally done, scenery, props, costumes in virtual spaces. Then we go to environment, which is we're now having to literally build the structure. So where is our audience natively experiencing the show? Where do they feel comfortable? And then what formats can we bring to the virtuality of the performance? And there's a variety of tools to do this. And I think letting it honor the audience experience and the story and treating that not as some like weird new tech thing, but as the staging, right? Black box versus a round versus a thrust versus site specific, treating our environment that way and choosing technological tools that support those narrative choices. Then virtual, I think that in some ways we kind of are like, yeah, this has to be virtual, or like, yeah, but this is the virtual version of the play. And we kind of treat it like a dirty word instead of, no, like what makes this the virtual production, capital V? How are you leaning into that to allow virtuality to be a creative choice in this production? I come from the web series world, and for a long time, there was this shame of like, I mean, it's kind of bad television. But then digital short form content became its own incredible genre that has really now led to the streaming giants that we know today of Netflix and Disney Plus and Hulu. And so in some ways, I think taking ownership of your virtuality rather than treating it as some sort of a handcuff and then making that part of what informs the narrative and the creative choices you're making. Then I went to iterative, which is basically you've got to really work on your workflow of how not only do you evolve the storytelling of like, this is this production, now how do we make it a little better in rehearsal incrementally each day, but also how do we stand it up again and again and again reliably? And so that comes to your pipeline, your workflow, and dialing that in from as early as possible. So often in theater, I think that we ideate and create behind these closed doors and incubate the show. And then we have tech week. And instead, I think now we've got to start day one with technology and technologists, and we've got to iterate and rehearse and devise with them in mind the entire way. And sometimes, you know, an actor that has access to different tools, that helps inform character, right? Actors who may be potting together, suddenly that gives us a sense of intimacy that other characters on this stage can't have. So we start making choices based off of what actual technological access everybody has from day one, rather than making really great, bold, creative choices that then may or may not mesh with what technology we have. Then, sorry, then I get
you're doing great.
synchronicity, which is the thing that we're all missing. This is the secret sauce, is that sense that this is happening live together. And how do we make the audience aware and engaged with each other? And that's the synchronicity. And that could be through, you know, some people use chat, some people have interactive portions of the show. Some people, you know, you're hosting it in a VR world like I've done, where you're actually seeing other avatars and you have emojis going off that, you know, that person's laughing or that person's applauding. but really thinking about how the audience is going to be represented physically in virtual space so that they feel like they're attending an actual production. They're not just watching a YouTube video. And then finally, engagement, which is how do you interact with the audience before, during, and after the production using a variety of tools. And in this bucket, I put monetization because I think that's the number one question right now is the sustainability and the scalability of all of this to basically say, how do we engage with an audience in a meaningful way and also allow this process to be financed, monetized, and continue beyond this one show?
How does it thrive in the world,
Work.
right? Because that interactivity has to be this feedback loop that either generates something with the community. You've done a lot of modeling here around community-driven production models, right? So not just top-down leadership or having one decision maker, but maybe coming up with a open sandbox or experimental approach to how you're creating theater together. I think that's phenomenal, especially if you're trying to teach theater at the university level or even before. I don't know how many teachers and professors are diving in at this level. Do you have a sense of who's kind of, throwing themselves fully in, whether it's into hubs or into some of these AR experiences?
I think that when I first started this journey last March, a lot of folks wanted to just ride out the storm. And so I very quickly, there were the people who were interested and the people who were like, yeah, I think we'll be fine. And come January 1, I want to say at least 50% of the people who had told me go fish last year started reaching out again. And I think that people are dealing with the new normal and the new reality that not only do we not know when we're going to be reopening physical spaces, but I also think there is no question that on the other side of this, there will be a digital layer or a virtual layer to physical theater moving forward, whether that's just promotionally or just letting people in on the rehearsal room or the process, or whether that's a secondary digital ticket. We're all working that out and every institution will make the decision that's right for them. But I think that the unparalleled access this has created for live entertainers to be able to reach a global audience, and even a local audience. There's community members that did not feel welcome or invited to our theatrical spaces in the before times that we have to have a reckoning with. I think this is a lot of what we're talking about in kind of like the representing Black bodies and Black storytelling on Broadway. We're having a real conversation about who's been invited to the party here. And that's at our local community level as well. There are theater institutions that did not invite their own communities to the party. They invited their subscribers. And that's a reckoning we're going to have. And so if digital and virtual can be the beginning of an invitation to a community that does not feel welcome in the physical space, I think there's a bridge that can be made there.
I think you're making bridges right now, but I also want to reach out to those who are listening to this live cast who do run amazing BIPOC-led theater groups all over the world. Please reach out to folks like Brendan if you need virtual theatrical support. And that can be immersive theater, VR theater, obviously things for museums and public spaces and AR as well, or figuring out some sort of hybrid theatrical experiences as you've been describing. And this is part of what we do at Playable as well, is thinking about the mix of gameplay, experience design, in some cases a narrative or a story world. And I love the creativity that you're bringing to this process. What comes next for you? What are you most excited about in 2021?
Oof. I mean, I'm the type of person that says yes to too many things. So I have said yes to dozens of projects. And I think really what I do is take my cues from my collaborators, in that, like, I'm crazy and up at 3 a.m. and I kind of quickly realize who's up at 3 a.m. with me. So you're playing a series of GIFs. Like I kind of someone wrote on Twitter that like I should make GIFs of being in VR. And I was like, oh, I'll do that. Let me know in the comments what GIFs would want. And it's been really fun having community members say, I would use a GIF that was of this. And I've been like, great, I'll make it. But I think for me, what I'm really looking to do is take that next step for myself as an artist. I think that so much of this early this early coalition work that I've been doing and educational work I've been doing has really had to be technology front facing, because I'm basically having to say, this is the technology, this is how we're going to get through it, come with me. And I really want to start working more towards shows where the technology is the way that technology supports previous theater, lighting, scenic, projections, right? That the technology is just supporting the narrative rather than being something that is, it's not a tech demo. This isn't E3, this is Edinburgh.
Right. At the end of the day, we're trying to figure this out, right? How do you make the technology an enabler of the experience without making it about that?
That is the smarter way of saying what I was trying to say. Well,
and that's interface design, and that's thinking about usability and experience design and disciplines that aren't necessarily taught in theater school.
Yep.
So I'm curious where you picked up those skills and where you're learning. It sounds like you're resourcing from many different places.
I'm constantly, I kind of fall down rabbit holes all the time. And again, this is where I really love the XR. The independent filmmaking community was so welcoming to me early in my career as an actor and then a writer, director, storyteller, that now the XR community seems to be the parallel of that in technology, in the sense that, like, I really feel like it's an open garden community of, here's what we've learned, here's my repository, what are you contributing? It's kind of a potluck, right? And I can always show up with ribs. And I'm excited to see what everybody else shows up with.
I feel like you're showing up with ribs on a regular basis, and I want to watch you on Netflix. So keep bringing it wherever that ends up. I'm excited to see. You had to pass this along, I guess it was last week. This is a new project that you did. And I just found this so charming. I'm a painter, and I've always thought about mixing painting and theater and what it would be like to have paintings come to life. And I feel like you captured something that made my 11-year-old self so happy with this piece. Can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing here? And I'm gonna play it, but I'm gonna play it maybe a little bit lightly in terms of the sound.
Sure. So this was, again, one of these kind of Twitter collaborations where I got approached by Kelly Hayes, who's a virtual scenic designer who does a lot of Zoom theater. And she literally just wrote, I've got a concept for you. And it was this painting with Enter Here. And I was like, there's the Sondheim musical based off of this. This is a known physical painting. And I thought it would be a really compelling way to demonstrate to people the idea of taking, when I talk about design, of thinking about 2D presentation in 3D space. So I took the painting, and what we've done is we've cut out every single element or asset of this painting and then stacked it in 3D space, so that from this angle, it appears to be two-dimensional. It appears to be just a painting on the wall. But in a moment, you're going to start seeing that I can move and pilot the camera through and around the painting to be able to kind of make it come to life. And I'm excited by the idea that our scenery can become immersive and part of the storytelling process. And if my modeling skills were better, you could build each of those into a model. Each of those could be an avatar. You could have the entire painting technically come to life. But this is what I was able to do in my living room, to kind of just piece together me singing a song from Sunday in the Park with George in front of and then inside of the painting that it is based on, which just kind of tethers all the worlds, right? The original kind of two-dimensional art world into the Broadway theater world, into the web XR world.
I love this piece all the way through. I mean, your voice is great, by the way.
Well, thanks.
Just like, I was like, wow, you can sing like that too. I had no idea, but that doesn't surprise me at all. I loved what you did here with this sort of pan around, and just bringing each of these characters into their own space. It felt very a sweet tribute to a painting I've always liked. So thank you for helping me get a sense. So you said this was in your living room. And this is a 5-minute piece, but then you do a tutorial at the end of it, right?
Yeah, so it's about a 2.5-3 minute song. And then what I did was I basically just time-lapsed the process that it took to make it while playing the song underneath it again. just to show people kind of behind the scenes how we got here. So this is cutting out each of the individual elements, which obviously took more time than this, and then stacking them all up together inside of Mozilla Spoke, which is kind of the back end of Mozilla Hubs to be able to build environments. Then finding literally an open gallery templated space to be able to put the painting on the wall. And then this was a fun thing where I actually used OBS Ninja to be able to, on top of my headset, to be able to try to put myself inside the painting. And then there's, you recognize it at this point, my little curtained living room area where I screened myself out. And this is how I kind of staged and rehearsed it, was I used this to help work out what my dimensions were and where I needed to be and how I needed to scale myself with distance and spacing. And then because I wanted this to live and I needed to be able to also kind of move through it and around it, I performed and recorded myself and then turned myself into a GIF so that I could remove the background. And so,
okay. So you're turning yourself into transparent GIFs throughout the environment. That's clever, because the video wouldn't do that. And I was like, yeah, thank you.
So, but a trick about GIFs is you can only save a GIF in 500 frame increments. So what you have to do is save out 500 frames at a time, bringing them into Photoshop, and there's a little hack you can do to force it to export more frames. So I did that. And then I brought the GIF in, and then I was able to basically, I'm singing as a GIF in the world, and I'm able to then pilot around as an avatar and immerse myself in the thing. Isn't that spatial?
Thank you for making that for me, by the way. I was so I laughed. I laughed so hard when that came. So thank you. You are so generous with your creativity and your capacity for others and for making space for other people to do their best work. Thank you, number one, for all of us who I'm honored to see how, those conversations we had last summer have turned into so much for you. And it sounds like whether it's, extended reality or this sort of hybrid experience design, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for participatory media as well. I'm personally very excited for the hybrid interactive theater revolution that's going to happen as we take all of these, the lessons of intimacy that we've learned in VR theater, for example. I feel like some of these media do a very good job of tuning us into what are the most essential elements of a piece, and then figuring out how to maybe play with that in new ways, right? So spatial audio obviously is doing this quite a bit, but then avatars, right? Being able to become Godzilla 1 minute and then become something completely different without even a costume change. Are there other key affordances you look forward to seeing other people exploring that maybe you haven't had time to do yet?
I mean, I have a whiteboard filled with things. I think volumetric video is obviously an easy next step for a lot of things, because I think people do like seeing humans represented if they don't feel as comfortable with video game culture or avatar performance. So I think that in some ways having that that backup at all times, that you're safe with the person. So I think volumetric is a huge thing. But then I also just think in some ways 360 technology, I feel like got off on the wrong foot because it got treated like cinema. And since that, like, oh, it's a camera, so it must be Hollywood, versus I think theater really affords us. Sorry, I'm getting a call. I think theater really is the right entry point for a lot of this technology, specifically because you're talking about a medium where a scarf makes me another character. Right? Where so much of the magical realism is about the suspension of disbelief of the audience and them committing to the journey with us. And so I think theater has a lot to offer this technology in this moment, that maybe the desire to kind of lean into cinema or video game technology, to me, that requires such a fidelity of image or such a reliance on 4K special effects. And I know you have a special effects company. I'm not poo-pooing that. But I am saying, like, I think that in early days, as we're iterating, what I really, really want to do is make sure that every theater performer stuck at home feels invited to this party, because there's so much room for you right now. And I think that your unique brain for how you make a world in a black box is literally what we need right now because we're all stuck in a darn box.
It could be any world you want. And that's the exciting opportunity. We have this, I think COVID has made us more open to experimentation than ever before because we had to be. In order to be resilient, we had to innovate and figure out new ways to create theater. And so now this experimentation bug is starting to yield interesting fruit. And I'm excited for interactive participatory media futures, community-driven theater that is more sort of creator-centric instead of, platform or studio driven. I think there's a lot of opportunities for the sort of massively decentralized media futures that many of us can play in. So Brendan, I want to thank you for making time to join us today. And for those of you who want to hit you up, Brendan A. Bradley on the social media that you prefer, that works for most of us, right?
All the social medias. My camera battery just died, so this is the audio portion. But yes, Brendan A. Bradley is where you can find me on literally every medium and mode, or brendanabradley.com. And I have a full blog there where I've literally detailed how I've made everything I've made so far, that you can go check out and read or watch. So it is for whatever way that you receive content and information. I've kind of blogged it out, and I've made these videos and tutorials on my YouTube channel.
Well, thank you for sharing all of your work. I'm going to go ahead and turn this up and make it big for us as we're going out today. And thank you for joining us today on Virtual Experiences. This is Evo Haining at Playable Agency. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Brendan?
No, thanks so much for having me on. And I look forward to collaborating with you and the community. And thanks for everything you do for the space.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for joining us today.
Have a great day.
To tell me why she left me.